Welcome back to RFL. Mike Piazza and Ken Griffey Jr. were just inducted or just elected for induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Griffey got more than 99% of the vote. That is the highest percentage ever. He takes over from Tom Seaver, who had the highest percentage up until today. On the phone now, we're joined by record baseball columnist Bob Klapisch. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
First of all, your thoughts about the selection and election of Mike Piazza and Ken Griffey to the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Well, two very deserving candidates. I mean, I'm just a little disappointed that Griffey didn't get in unanimously. There's three voters out there who somehow, for some reason, didn't put him on their ballots. Doesn't make sense to me. But, I think Piazza's time has been coming for years now, and I think he was very deserving. It should have been in, 2 or 3 years ago. But overall, it's a good induction. It's a good ballot. It's a good moment for the Hall of Fame, and it'll be a nice ceremony this summer.
Bob, you have a vote for the Hall of Fame. I assume you voted for both Griffey and Piazza. Did anybody else get votes from you?
Yeah, I voted for 10 candidates, including the PED scandal candidates. I voted for Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, Jeff Bagwell, who was to a lesser degree painted with a same brush. I just felt that those guys deserved it based on their statistics, and if Major League Baseball never disciplined them, they were never suspended. They were considered in good standing throughout their careers. The federal government could not pin steroids on them if they failed to get a conviction. It really wasn't up to me as a writer to uphold that. Really, it's not my job to be a prosecutor or a chemist or a lawyer and figure out what was what. Like I said, the federal government couldn't put anything on Clemens and Bonds, and I was going to simply evaluate them based on their statistics. And to me, those are no-brainer candidates.
I'll ask you about those guys and similarly placed players in just a second. But back to Piazza for just a second, because he had been sort of stained with the rumors or whispers of steroids. There had always been discussions that maybe he used something, but his name never came up in the Mitchell report. There was never anything conclusively shown. And I'm curious about that impact on Piazza and the delay on his election, and whether his election will now open the door to other people who are similarly linked to it without direct linkage, like a Bagwell or like a Tim Raines.
I think that's a good question. I do think that voters' attitudes are slowly changing. I mean, let's face it, some of the older voters now are being weaned out of the process through one way or another, and there's a newer attitude, I think a little more open-minded about it, that it was a product of the era. I mean, just about everybody was doing it, and, if you were not caught conclusively, if there was no confession or conviction, if you were suspected of it without any hard evidence, I just don't think that's enough to keep you out of the Hall of Fame. And as you said, Mike Piazza didn't have, Balco or Tony Bosch or Greg Anderson, who was Barry Bonds' trainer. I mean, there was really nobody who was really ever Mike Piazza's go-to guy. I mean, he never really had anybody to be his enabler, so he couldn't even link him that way. Not in the Mitchell report. There was nothing really that linked him to steroids other than suspicion and hearsay, and that's just not enough to keep somebody who's the greatest hitting catcher of all time out of the Hall of Fame.
That, of course, then brings us back to Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Mark McGwire, people who either have admitted it or there's an evidentiary trail that shows that they did take some sort of drugs or steroids. Do you think that the election of Piazza makes it more or less likely that those guys will get in or get in the short term, or is there still a firewall between that conclusive proof of steroid use or PED use versus people who are just suspected?
Well, Bonds and Clemens have been slowly climbing in the final tallies over the years, so I would not say it's impossible that they get in, and certainly it bodes well for them that Piazza has finally gained acceptance because, like I said, there is obviously a lot of circumstantial evidence that links Bonds and Clemens to steroids, but nothing hard and fast. No arrests, no convictions, no discipline by Major League Baseball ever, and a failure by the federal government to pin it on them. So I think they do have hope. Now, the players who confessed to it or were caught, I just think they're going to have a hard time. I'm thinking about specifically Mark McGwire. I just don't know if he's ever going to get in, because if there is proof that you did it, there's still a large segment of voters who say it's just not going to happen. Suspicion alone, I don't think will keep players out. And like I said, I think that really leaves the door open for Bonds and Clemens. But players like McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Rafael Palmeiro, I don't think so.
Finally, Bob, when we bring up this topic on the show, one of the things that I've mentioned from time to time is I think Mark McGwire should be in the Hall of Fame just based on his stats and the dominance of his performance in the era, but maybe with something on his plaque in Cooperstown that indicates what he did. Would that be a mitigating factor for you? I know you voted for them, but do you think that other people would vote for them if there was that sort of mitigating factor?
Yeah, I mean, if the commissioner, Buzz Selig didn't do anything about it, but if Commissioner Rob Manfred would take a stand and give some guidance to the voters or put some perspective on their statistics or just be able to put it in context, that would be very, very helpful to the election process. But right now, he's really made himself invisible to the entire Hall of Fame ballot, and he's passed no judgment whatsoever. He's given no guidance as to how to evaluate a player like McGwire. So until that happens, I just don't see it. I just don't see his induction. I just don't see it anytime in the near future.
Klapisch is a baseball columnist for The Record in New Jersey, and he's one of the best at what he does on baseball. Bob, thank you so much for a few minutes tonight.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right, and we want to get you at home involved in this conversation. So here's what we want you to do. Head over to Facebook or Twitter and sound off on tonight's question. If you were a Hall of Fame voter, would you vote for a suspected PED, performance-enhancing drug user? Up next here on RFL, will Bill de Blasio make a comeback and fix some of the political problems he's been having, or will it be the same old de Blasio? City Hall Insider joins us with some answers.